There are quite a few zombie movies that have taken the interesting route of having the zombies be more, like, cognizant and malicious, I guess, than just mindless, hungry eating, going places. Blah, blah, blah. I'm specifically thinking of The Crazies, but also 28 Days Later to a lesser extent. That being said, I do think that this is one of the first, maybe the only one, that really goes buck wild with that concept, because this movie is brutal. I will be warning you that immediately. As I say that, please be aware that while I'm prone to hyperbole, I am not using it right now. This movie has a lot of trigger warnings, so I'm going to be as thorough as I can be, but I'm undoubtedly going to miss something. I will cover the triggers that I will discuss in this video, which is the most that I can do. Trigger warnings for sexual assault, violence against women, misogyny, murdering of infants, eye stuff, and extensive beatings. As far as I'm aware, this movie is only available on Shudder. If you love horror, I hope that you already have a subscription there. The range of horror that Shudder has is campy, goofy movies to other movies that are similar to The Sadness. So this movie takes place in Taiwan, which has a long, complicated history. The movie was directed by Rob Jabaz and apparently pretty heavily inspired by the Crossed series. I have not read any of the comics because this isn't an actual adaptation of it, but I can't attest to that statement at all. The stars of this movie are Brent Zhu and Regina. So one of the things I found really interesting was that this movie is in Cantonese, and the original Cantonese title can also be translated to The Crying Sadness, which I think is a little bit more accurate, because the sadness, it's not that they're sad, really, but I just thought that was interesting. The movie begins with a couple lying in bed together in the early morning. These are our two main protagonists, Jim and Kat. Although they are a very cute couple, there are also a lot of signs that this relationship is on its last leg. Jim doesn't remember that she took off an entire week and ended up booking something else in that time period, which, for someone that works in an office, is kind of a pain in the ass. He also looks at a paper of apartments that may show he's looking to move out alone. The introduction actually tells us a lot about the Elven virus, which is the illness that causes the sadness. It started out as a relatively normal virus, but the doctor that Jim watches discusses his concerns about how the virus is going to mutate. If you're any fan of these types of movies, then you will not be surprised to find out that he makes a connection to rabies. I feel like that's a pretty standard aspect of these kinds of movies. Zombie movies in general tend to connect to rabies a lot. Our first sign of something being amiss is a woman standing on the roof of another building. Jim calls out to her in concern as this old woman standing on a roof, and when she turns around, she has blood running down the front of her dress. No one else seems to notice this, and when Jim looks back, the woman is gone. So with nothing else to distract him, Jim and Kat head to the train station to drop Kat off. Now, I don't actually know what Jim does. Kat works in an office, Jim does something, which might also be kind of contributing to their issues in the relationship, which there is no going in depth in the movie. I'm kind of extrapolating this from what I saw. It's while he's waiting for his breakfast to be served that the woman who he saw on the roof shows up. Understandably, he's a little surprised, and a little bit concerned, and so is the guy that is closest to her, who she then pours hot oil over his face, and while his head is burning, she starts rooting around in his face with her fingers. At this point, all hell breaks loose. We see the woman on the roof, and she has blood on her. But other than that, it's been a pretty standard morning for Jim. The switch that is turned is fast, and from now on out, there's going to be blood somewhere on the screen. So turn around now if this sounds like too much, because this is so incredibly minor in this movie. Everyone in the restaurant goes absolutely batshit crazy. It happens so quickly that it is a little bit jarring, and Jim is doing his best to get out of there. Someone that is infected with a virus manages to get onto the announcements and said some unhinged stuff because, once again, they are unhinged. Understandably, Jim goes home and tries to get into contact with Kat while he is attacked by his neighbor. It was already confirmed that the neighbor had the Elven virus at some point, with Jim suggesting that he go to the hospital again. He was someone that didn't believe in the seriousness of the virus and thought that it was a suspicious thing that was happening on election year, which I do remember people saying that about COVID. So the neighbor sneaks up on him with a pair of plant shears, so Jim is going to be running around for the rest of the movie missing a few fingers. His primary goal is to try and get to Kat, and he's going to have to go through a lot in order to get to her. Unfortunately, Kat isn't getting any messages or calls from him because she is on the subway, which is why when we catch up to her, she is reading a book. Now, reading a book on the subway, granted, I don't live in New York City or somewhere with a subway. If someone's reading on the subway, I'm just going to assume that they're reading on the subway. They do not want someone to talk to. They're not looking for a friend. Which makes the older man sitting next to her a real jerk for starting to interrupt her. And he's giving off nice guy vibes. If you know, you know. Which, when she turns him down, proves it. He starts complaining that he hadn't done anything wrong and that pretty women were just like this. If you're femme to any extent, this is a very familiar experience. The only thing that she can really do is to diffuse the situation, is giving up her seat to a woman. I will be calling this woman from here on out as Poor Woman, because she's really gonna go through it in this movie. Among the people that got on the train with Poor Woman is a man wearing sunglasses. We notice some tears starting to fall down his face as he pulls a knife out, and then it's an absolute bloodbath. He is cutting up pretty much everyone that is in range. Eventually, some of the people on the train manage to get him pinned to the ground, but that doesn't really matter, because now there's someone else on the train with the sadness, and he's more than happy to continue where the other guy left off. It is in that moment that Poor Woman ends up being stabbed in the eye by an umbrella. The person that is wielding the umbrella is Creepy Man. He is infected, and that is probably the worst possible outcome for Kat that there could have been. So I'm running on the assumption that, this virus is spread through bodily fluids, and since the train is now covered in blood, it really does not take long for everything to hit the fan, because everyone is now not everyone, but a lot of the people on the train are now infected. Kat and Poor Woman get off the train immediately, which is just a smart idea. They're running through the platform. There aren't that many people in the area, but the Creepy Man is following them. They end up running into this guy who, as a viewer, you think is going to be a huge asset to them. And by that, I mean that he's a giant. And although he does punch the Creepy Man, it doesn't really matter. He still has morals, the creepy guy does not, and he has one goal, and it is to get to the women that he is harassing. So, Creepy Guy has no problem ripping the nose off of this guy with his teeth. Then kills the guy with a fire axe so that we are all aware that no one is going to come running in and save Kat. She is entirely on her own, and that is because she has a creepy dude completely zeroed in on her, and this is going to be hell for her. Thankfully, this section does have her and Poor Woman getting away from the creepy guy for a little while, no thanks to the guy that was trying to shut the door on them to lock them in the tunnel, but they get out and they're headed to the hospital, mostly because of the missing eye from the umbrella. Which, by the way, the gore in this movie is really, really good. There are multiple scenes where it's just a bloodbath, and it works really well because it's good. It's good gore. I think the gore does a really good job of expressing the kind of pain that these people are in, because it gets into it more later, which I'll talk about, but these infected really seem to need to feel pleasure while killing people. So the gore really needs to express that these people are A, in pain, and B, the people inflicting it are enjoying themselves a lot. So in this, Poor Woman is now missing an eye after Creepy Guy stabs her with his umbrella. And I have an eye thing, so it made me very deeply uncomfortable, which is good. That's the point. So Jim is on his way to meet Kat. The obvious plan is that once they're together, they'll be able to figure out what to do next. In his travel, he comes across a group of, I'm assuming, high school students based on their uniforms, torturing another student. Like, this teenager is horrifically brutalized, and I won't go into details, but there is very creative use of barbed wire. Jim manages to chase them away from the injured man in enough time for the man to get mad at him because apparently he was close. This is interesting because up until now we're running on the assumption that the sick are only interested in causing harm and terror to those who haven't been infected. But it seems as though they're fine with being on the receiving end of it as well, which is a pretty horrifying thing to be saying right now. Jim runs the hell away as the high school kids come back and start throwing things at him. This scene admittedly only exists to fill us in on what Jim is doing, and the world is just terrible. And I'm assuming it's because we get a little bit of respite with the next section with Kat, because we kind of need it. So Kat is with poor woman trying to get her some kind of medical attention. The hospital's filled with people they've escaped and are trying to find some kind of safety. There's police there. People are just kind of milling around. Nobody's infected at the moment. And honestly, this does give us a little bit of a reprieve, which I do appreciate. It's not that, like, the gore and stuff is intense, but it's the fact that for, like, the last, 10 minutes straight, it's been gore, 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 gore. And there's been no relaxation. This is like the last bit of, well, there's one other scene that's a little bit more relaxed. But this is the last relaxed scene that we have. And it's ruined by the government coming on. It's kind of obvious by the speech that is being given that there aren't many actual plans. They're just trying to get people to calm down in hopes of gaining some kind of control of the situation, which is pretty much what you would expect a government to do in a situation like this. However, what they're really going to do is traumatize absolutely everyone that is watching the news report. A man steps up to start talking, and it becomes clear very, very quickly that he is infected. He ends up causing absolute chaos on the screen, including shoving a grenade into a man's mouth, which I have to say was pretty cool. Not only is there chaos on the screen, but witnessing your government collapse right in front of you in 4K causes everyone in the hospital to start panicking. The police officer tries to get in control of the situation as best as he can, but Kat is ready to run away because she sees the creepy dude standing behind the police officer, and he has an axe with him. I don't know why she didn't warn him. I'm just assuming that she just wanted to get out of there. I feel like I don't really need to say that things go badly at the hospital. It doesn't go well. The way that we are introduced to Jim's infection also tells us a little bit about what the infected hallucinate. He sees a woman's head, and she's just laughing. In reality, it's just a mannequin. So it's interesting to think about how they might be experiencing everything. This is the only instance where we see it like this, and it is an interesting take, but they don't do anything with it, really. For now, it seems as though Jim can fight things off, but we're also very aware that that isn't going to last, and now he knows exactly where Kat is. I will mention at this point that at this point in the movie, it is exhausting. There's so much going on. There's so much brutality. And it's good. It's good. Don't get me wrong. But it is exhausting. And we are now sort of gifted the knowledge that Jim is infected. So now there is another infected man who knows where she is, who is coming to attack her. And he does. It's really not that sad, to be honest. We learn a few things about the virus that are pretty interesting and kind of explain a lot about what is going on in the minds of these people. The major thing that the virus affects is the limbic system, which is the part of our brain that controls basic emotions and also the things that drive us. The drives that are most important to this movie are hunger, sex, and dominance, because it certainly isn't caring for offspring. Remember how I said this was a maternity ward? Well, after being stripped down and washed, it is eventually discovered by Kat that she is not infected, and it was not nearly as empty as this man tried to say it was. There are infants tossed inside of a linen bag, so there are quite a few babies in there, including one that started crying. I am assuming the rest are deceased. back to Kat. So she's being chased by the creepy guy in the hospital. Again, she's struggling to stay alive, trying to run away from him. And then she kind of like pulls the Uno reverse card on him, and she uses a fire extinguisher to bash his brains in. And this is an incredibly satisfying moment, I will say. I am very glad that like he dies now and he doesn't continue to like stalk her and creep her out for the rest of the movie, because he served his purpose for being creepy and horrifying, and that's all we really needed him for. And at this point, Kat is acting a little unhinged, which, fair, which is why when the virologist opens the door, he's very hesitant to let her kind of be free range in his place. His primary motivation for killing the babies is that he didn't want for them to be at the hands of the infected. Which, if that was the only reason that he was motivated to kill them, I might have actually let it slide. What the infected in this movie are doing to people, I would really not want to have done to a baby. And I don't want to think about how creative they would get with it either. But at the same time, he was using them as guinea pigs, so these babies are infected with the virus. The good news for Kat is that it seems as though she is not infected and is actually immune to the virus. And I'm sticking with that interpretation of what happens at the end of the movie, which of course I will talk about in a little bit. Because she is assumed to be immune, they are heading out of there in hopes of finding some cure, which could be found in her. That's when the doctor ended up being bitten on the foot, and then the infected person attacking him starts vomiting on his foot, which is pretty gross and also a very, very direct way for him to be infected. I feel like it's important to note that at this point, the virologist is not infected in any way. So everything that he is doing full knowledge of what he is doing. And it is not for pleasure, it is for something else entirely. Like, this man is fine. He did this sanely. Kat takes this opportunity to ask Jim what it's like to be infected. Jim probably sounds the most in love that he has sounded the entire movie when he talks about how good it feels to want to kill her. And he makes it clear the horrific things that he would do to her if he was able to get to her. So I've seen like a little bit of debate about the ending. I've seen a lot of people claim that Kat is infected at the end of the movie, but she's not. Her crying is a completely normal reaction to the kind of day that she's had. So I don't believe that she was infected. I think she was crying because the man she loved just explicitly explained that he wanted to do horrifying things to her. And understandably, she was not happy about this information. So I don't believe that she was infected when she went up. I do believe that because she was crying, that whoever was stopping for the virologist shot her because they thought she was infected, but she wasn't. Or the alternative is that whoever landed was infected. Either way, Kat does die by the end of the movie, and Jim bleeds out, I believe. So, very cheerful ending. Is this movie uncomfortable? Yes. There's a lot of gore and a lot of subject matter that a lot of people may not like. Which is completely understandable. This is a disturbing movie, definitely. Its entire purpose is to disturb you. But there is a certain amount of art to the gore in this movie. Just the train scene was so ridiculously blood-soaked, and it was great, to be honest. That was a great scene, and it shocked me. The first time I saw it, I was shooketh. Is this movie good? Kind of. It really relies on the violence and gore a lot, so I feel like certain aspects of the movie were kind of laid to the wayside. One of which, and we only get like a 30-second scene where we can see things from Jim's perspective and we can see his hallucinations. That is not touched upon again. So we don't actually know what these people are seeing. which is unfortunate because I am very curious about like how they experienced this. I feel like it goes without saying that this movie isn't for everyone. I definitely feel like if you know someone well enough and they like spooky horror gore, then this is the movie for them. But if not, then I would err on the side of caution about introducing this movie to people. Thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Amanda, and this has been Horror Historian. So, it's been a rough year, to be honest, which is why I haven't uploaded. I'm on Twitter, so follow me. I'm also on TikTok. Most of my TikToks are just kind of shit posts, so if you enjoy that, definitely recommend me. Ooh, goodness, that was gross. I'm sorry, but I'm not re-recording this. So, I've been talking for like 2 minutes straight. I gotta wrap it up somehow. Okay. So I do plan on posting more. I promise that I'm not just gonna appear in like Christmas time to make videos. It was just a rough year, but I'm here now, and I will continue to be here because I need someone to talk about these movies with. Not that my friends don't like horror movies, just that like, look how long this video is. Most people don't want to hear me talk that much. So I appreciate you for watching. If you want, you can subscribe. I am currently working on an adaptation, like a book to movie adaptation, where the book is actually worse than the movie. So that'll be interesting. Not usually how that goes, but I will see you then, which hopefully will be next week.